Story 1. I don't give full stars because there is always room for improvement. I replied that it doesn't matter how hard I work for you, since you just stated it doesn't matter. Story 2. Don't write it down. My boss demanded to know why I was submitting 2 hours of overtime every week for over a month. I had to stay late every day past my shift because my coworker was at least 15 minutes late to work each day, and I wasn't supposed to leave until they arrived. Rather than tell my coworker to come in on time, he opted for me to continue working without receiving overtime pay. I told him, no problem. From that day on, I simply left on time regardless of the situation. After a month of that, my boss finally found a way to tell my coworker to arrive on time so that shifts were fully covered. Story 3. My boss was observing me one day while I was busy working and said, "So I pay you all this money just to push a few buttons?" He was referring to my keyboard, so I fired back, "Yes, but it's knowing which keys to press and when that's important." Story 4. My boss, whose mother tongue is not English, told me that my written English was poor, even though I am a native English speaker. I asked him what he meant, but he was unable to explain or provide examples. He had a tendency to correct me even when I was right. For instance, during one team meeting, I used the phrase beck and call. He interrupted me and said, "It's beck and call." Story 5. It's all in your head, Mental Health Commission. I walked away with a paper that read, "Fully mentally healthy." Story 6. My father recommended suicide to me when I was a young teenager. I wasn't angry at that moment, but as I processed the gravity of it over time, it became infuriating. Story 7. In 5th grade, I complained to a teacher about being bullied. She told me, "You would make more friends if you got your nose out of that book every once in a while." Yes, let's discourage that reading habit so that the mean girls will treat me better. Story 8. You have the potential to be a good nurse. After being a combat medic and a paramedic for 8 years, I am now a nurse. Move forward. Story 9. The assignment was to circle or underline any words we didn't know from a 2 or 3 paragraph short story for 6th grade. I read the story, then approached the teacher's desk and said that I understood everything. She told me it was impossible and to try again. I am in my 30s now, and this still makes my blood boil. Story 10. Today I was told that I don't show initiative, and then in the next sentence I was criticized for setting up monitors without asking. This is the same person I spoke to about my teammate doing my work without informing me, which wasted my time. He said it's my fault and that I need to communicate with him more effectively. I love my job and the people I support, but I am frustrated with my IT teammates. Story 11. My boss told me, "You need to dress more appropriately." I'm sure male colleague 1 and male colleague 2 appreciate it, but I don't. I was 29, she was nearly 50, and I was wearing regular shirts to work. Absolute basic office wear. I came home and cried for hours because I couldn't afford to buy new clothes, and I didn't understand why she'd said it, as you couldn't even see a bit of cleavage, and I didn't even have cleavage to talk about then. I went to Human Resources the next day and told them what she'd said. I remember the HR representative gasping in disbelief, and her eyebrows almost disappearing into her hairline. Within a week, I was moved from her department. She then told everyone I'd accused her of being a bully, which was a lie, and she was completely unpleasant to my replacement as well. 14 years ago, and it still makes me mad that she thought it was acceptable to say that to me. Story 12. We served as environmental officers for an engineering company conducting environmental impact assessments to ensure that building projects would not harm local wildlife. I discovered that the construction company had destroyed an entire badger set and accidentally killed several animals in the process, which is highly illegal. Story 13. I was once told I was not allowed to drink water in class. The reason was that everyone else would want to do it. Yes, everyone should be allowed to do it. Story 14. When I was in my first year of teaching, my school let me down by assigning me an unqualified mentor. This meant I would have had to redo a year of training, but I appealed and won. I ended up resigning, and my principal remarked within earshot, "She doesn't know how good she has it here." Absolutely not. In the next school where I taught, my dad ended up in the hospital fighting pneumonia. We were advised not to leave the area because doctors didn't think he would survive. The principal was aware of this but said, "We're not giving you any more time off." Spoiler, he survived, and I decided I was done with teaching due to unprofessional principals. Story 15. A long time ago, I had a manager who said in a meeting that everyone needed to stop acting selfishly because nobody here is irreplaceable. Get some perspective. Later, he was replaced for having an inappropriate relationship. I still find it amusing whenever I recall that moment. Story 16. I do not like the sticky notes on your files. They are too large and you need to use this blue pen from now on, not black. The sticky notes were for me to remind myself of what I had done in the auditing process. Once it was ready to hand off, I removed the notes. She was the ultimate micromanager. Story 17. When I was about 20, I told my line manager that I would like to pursue a promotion opportunity one had become aware of, but it would involve moving to a different office. At that time, there was no formal process to apply for promotions, and they did not involve interviews. If management wanted you, they promoted you or moved you to a different position, but generally you would express your interest informally. He responded in a rather indifferent manner, stating that there was no point because he had already spoken to the area director and that I would be staying in my current position for the time being. When I asked why, he replied, "Because I need you here." I was reaching a point where I could stand up for myself more effectively, and I asked him if he had truly blocked a promotion for me simply because it suited him. I escalated the matter and was promoted within a couple of weeks. Story 18. My manager said, "We are not that far behind. You and your coworker just need to work harder." This was a year ago and we are still behind. Story 19. Work harder or find a different job. In response to a cost of living adjustment request, I tried the work harder approach and eventually found a different job with a 125% salary increase. Story 20. When I was 17, I worked as an office assistant, handling mail, typing, covering reception, and making deliveries. We also held weekly formal lunches for up to 12 clients, for which I collected, plated, and served a 3-course meal followed by coffee, and cleaned up afterwards. The cleanup could take hours in a tiny kitchen sink. After one of these lunches, the boss came into the kitchen to get a drink from the fridge and asked how I was doing. I replied, "We need a dishwasher." His response was, "That's what you are." This was also the man in his 60s who couldn't remember my name and referred to me as the one with the breasts. Story 21. As a server, a difficult restaurant manager overloaded me and my colleagues with too many tables. I informed the hostess that I couldn't take another table until I received the order for a large group. The manager confronted me and insisted, "When you're given a table, you have to take it." I attempted to reason with him, asking if I should let my other tables wait unnecessarily long for their orders. He interrupted me, insisting, "You take the tables, end of story." Service suffered that night and on many other nights under his supervision. He was eventually fired for his incompetence. Story 22. I wrote a paper for an essay during my first year of undergraduate studies. The professor told me it contained a bad argument and was unsubstantiated, leading to a lower grade. In the next lesson, he quoted my essay word for word and claimed he had come up with it while reading his material. After that class, I stopped attending in person and no longer watched the recordings. I passed the course with the equivalent of an A and recently discovered that he had done the same to other students. We complained, but he dismissed us by saying, "You're only students. You don't know anything." Story 23. I tried to talk to my mom about some of the abuse I suffered as a child, and she told me I was making it up and that I was only saying I was abused to make her feel bad. Story 24. I expect you to always exceed expectations. Therefore, I cannot give you an exceeds expectations ranking, as you are simply meeting my expectations. Story 25. You just need to focus on my subject. I don't care about how you do in others, my 8th grade teacher. I still kind of dislike her. Story 26. Management wanted us to report everything, be mindful of health and safety, and keep accurate paperwork. I complied and always reported everything to auditors as required. Management later dismissed me for gross misconduct without warning. I met and exceeded all my targets and even assisted other departments regularly when I had the time. I did not interact with other employees inappropriately. They resented my reporting, and I reported illegal practices. We manufactured fire doors for reference, and the manager only cared when his superior visited and noticed our work. For further context, I was also groped by a coworker on multiple occasions, and management was uninterested. This was genuinely one of the worst companies in the UK. It's a shame they produce fire doors. Story 27. I had a part-time job at a grocery store while I was studying. My boss did not understand that I prioritized school over the underpaid job. I informed him in advance that I could not work on a specific day because it was the day of my exams, and I could not take on any extra work that week. However, he assigned me work almost every day that entire week, including the day I requested off. He refused to listen to me, and none of my coworkers offered help. In the end, I had to fake an illness to complete my exams. Eventually, my boss was fired by his superiors after he disappeared for 6 months. He tried to blame it on diabetes. Story 28. I was reflecting on why so many people targeted me for harassment. It wasn't too serious, but it was annoying. My mom said it was probably because of the ring in my nose. Fantastic. I was blamed by my own mother for my facial piercings. She also once told me I wouldn't get into the college I wanted because I dyed my hair black. I'm not sure what one thing has to do with the other. Does the college even see you when you apply? If I bring any of this up later, she'll just say it never happened. I have no idea if she actually forgot or just doesn't want to acknowledge it. Others with similar parents can probably relate. Story 29. 4th grade art teacher. No blue wolves, no Pokemon, no comics. Just make normal art or I'm going to fail you. Art class was supposed to be a place where I could have fun learning. She made it clear that was not the case. Even more than 20 years later, I still struggle to connect anything my brain associates with the word art, because I genuinely gave up after her class. Story 30. He's fine now, said to me by my mother every time I tried to tell her about the latest unhinged thing my father did, and that I was scared he was going to snap and hurt me. After a while, I just gave up trying. Story 31. You do not have that symptom. You have not been diagnosed with that disorder. Mother, I regret to inform you that executive dysfunction is indeed a symptom of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which you insisted I had and for which I was diagnosed. However, my mother never admitted she was wrong, so I engaged in a several-day conflict with an adult over this, before realizing I was wasting my time and just ignored her. It added to a long list of medical gaslighting. Also, executive dysfunction is not unique to attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. This woman is so deep in denial that I would have to cough up a tonsil stone into the palm of her hand before she would believe I have one. Story 32. I had a new bar manager when I was a bar supervisor. I had been running the bar single-handedly for over 6 months while waiting for a new manager. When he arrived, I was told to stop what I was doing to run the place efficiently, so I complied. After a while, I went on holiday for 2 weeks, and when I returned, the first thing he said to me was, "Please fix everything." Story 33. I have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and autism. I get overwhelmed quickly in a public setting. I told my boss I was starting to fall into a panic attack. She said, "It's okay. Everyone feels like this. I am having a panic attack because I have to mask at work, and it's exhausting." My mask was starting to slip. Story 34. I was in 6th grade when my math teacher presented an advanced problem on the board. She stated that whoever was the first to solve it correctly and show their work would not have to do homework for a week. I disliked homework and seized this opportunity. I completed the problem and brought it to her desk. She reviewed it and told me, "You got the correct answer, but you worked it out horizontally instead of vertically. It should be vertical, so I cannot give you the homework pass." Story 35. I was at school. The teacher was acting all high and mighty, saying, "Oh, you didn't ask to go to the bathroom? Marked absent." I replied, "Well, I guess I should have just used a bottle instead of leaving without permission." The teacher responded, I am your teacher. You have to do as I say because I am better than you. Story 36. My husband used to work for a company that advised him to consider how his daughter would feel if he continued causing trouble and got fired. We do not have children at all, let alone a daughter. Story 37. You don't sound happy enough, said the foreman. I was the only woman on the crew and the only one to receive comments like this. I responded by using my best Alicia Silverstone clueless imitation whenever he spoke to me. Story 38. I was once fired even though he agreed my work was fine. However, I had stated that I was there for the money while working as a waiter during graduate school. He preferred people who were committed to the company. It was a British-themed chain restaurant. I found the situation ridiculous, so I just laughed and left. Story 39. My manager stated that while they understood the rules, they were asking me to break them. The same manager later argued against assigning a task to another group, despite the fact that it had been imposed on us while we were severely understaffed. Story 40. My boss was ordering me to do things from the other side of the restaurant. When I asked what he wanted, he walked away because he didn't hear me, just like I couldn't hear him. A few minutes later, he asked if I had completed the task, and I replied that I didn't hear what he said. He then told me I should listen better. I responded that it wasn't about not listening, but about the fact that I couldn't hear him. He labeled me as arrogant, which shocked me given that I was his employee. Later, I apologized for being smart, hoping he would apologize for calling me arrogant. He simply said it was fine and attributed his comment to the heat of the moment without acknowledging what he had said. Story 41. A high school teacher said that I cannot do math as a girl, even after becoming second in the entire country in a math competition. When my parents told him that was impossible, he said my achievement was just luck, and that I guessed the right answers. Story 42. The owner of a company I worked for instructed me to sell a specific product to a client. The client was our largest and had explicitly communicated that they did not want that product in advance. I made the pitch based on the owner's directions. The client chose a new supplier, and our company ceased operations shortly after. Story 43. What task has the highest priority? Everything has the highest priority. Well, great. That means nothing has priority, and I get to choose which task I feel like doing right now. Got it? No, I don't have that ticket done yet. I was working on another high-priority task, remember? Story 44. Are you sure you are having an asthma attack and not just running away from your bullies? Asked a teacher who was the principal at school. I was visibly out of breath, shaking from the salbutamol, and sweaty. No, I wasn't avoiding them. They weren't in my class. Yes, I was on puff 10 of my inhaler, and my condition continued to worsen until I was taken to the emergency room. Story 45. When I conducted quality control for a company that manufactured parts for aircraft, I learned their reasoning for hasty shipments. It was the end of the month, and they wanted to make their numbers look good. If anything was wrong, their receiving inspector would return the items. I resigned shortly after that. Story 46. My teacher in elementary school encouraged us to go outside and engage in activities. Authorities often told me what I did, why I did it, how I was feeling, and that nobody would believe me over them. My employer did not understand why a running track is staggered. My mother told me she wished I had never been born. Story 47. I was an assistant golf professional in California at the time. I told my head golf professional that I wanted to be a golf professional in Hawaii, and he said that was a pipe dream. Who says that? I ended up being a golf professional on cruise ships that sailed the Hawaiian Islands, and eventually on a yacht that sailed the globe, which turned out to be better than my original dream. Story 48. I was a hostess at around 16. A server told me that a table needed a manager, so I informed the manager. It turned out that she accidentally gave me the wrong table number, which resulted in him going to a different table and yelling at me in front of customers for embarrassing himself and making him look foolish. Story 49. Working for a company in London. Don't hire someone with an accent. You know one of the owners doesn't like accents. But I have an accent. Oh, with you it's different. Story 50. A young colleague lost his father, so he didn't come to work. My boss was very angry that the colleague didn't bring back the car he had borrowed and that he wasn't answering the phone. He said, "Yes, it is sad that he lost his father, but my wife lost her sister, who was younger than his father, and she managed to finish her work. He has some responsibility." The funniest thing, the car was already there. It had been there all along. On another day, he tried to convince a colleague that she could come to work after a funeral to show her movie. Funerals aren't that long. This guy is unbelievable. I will never forget that he is an empath. He won't get the best of me. Story 51. If they don't take you seriously and believe lies about you, it does hurt. A former vice principal accused me of being a drug addict because I missed a lot of school. He yelled at me in his office and was disrespectful. I was a teenager at the time and had never done any drugs in my life, not even marijuana. I had heard stories about this man, and they all seemed unbelievable. Then I had my own experience with him. If he had just cared enough to ask why I missed so much school instead of being judgmental, I could have received the help I needed much faster. In the end, he did help me by getting me into an alternative program where I needed to be, but not before he judged me. Story 52. You're acting like a drug addict? Coming from my parents who put me on narcotics at 9 years old because I was an inconvenience. Yes, I am acting like a child on meth because I'm a child on meth. It turns out amphetamines don't cure autism spectrum disorder. Story 53. Your parents do actually own you, said the therapist funded by my estranged mother. Attack therapy is a non-evidence-based approach derived from debunked dog training, centered on abusing children into compliance. Story 54. Yes, we understand that our pay may not match that of our competitors, but we allow casual dress in the office and offer a cycle-to-work scheme. Story 55. I was the first poor person in a rich village back in the late 1980s and early 1990s. I wouldn't even know where to start on this. I was not allowed to be smart. I was not allowed to be better than the other children. Teachers would lie. Children would beat me in groups and adults would watch. I had no idea it was a class issue until I was older, and it all became glaringly obvious. Most people are a lot worse than they would like you to believe, so look after the good ones you find. I am a long way from there now, and I am in my 3rd year of university as a mature student studying physics and mathematics. Story 56. Man up and tough it out. I thought as my 9-year-old self experienced an asthma attack triggered by the cold winter air while stacking firewood. After finishing, I was finally able to return to the warm house and try to regain control of my breathing while my dad chain-smoked cigarettes and drank. It took another 3 years to realize that smoking indoors likely wasn't the best idea with a child who had asthma. Yes, I am a very independent person now. Very, very independent. Story 57. I had been struggling with my mental health at my previous job. I was on sick leave for a few weeks and knew it would lead to a competency meeting when I returned. My manager spoke to me, thinking it would help and show me how serious things were. He told me that human resources wanted to let me go because of the trouble I was causing them. They couldn't dismiss me outright since my performance issues were related to a documented long-term mental health condition. That did not help. I was back on sick leave the following week, for a much longer duration. Story 58. In junior school, as a class, we were asked what part of an animal was meat. I confidently raised my hand and answered, the muscles. I was somewhat ridiculed for this, but I wouldn't have minded too much if the teacher hadn't given the correct answer as the flesh. I beg your pardon, the flesh? Story 59. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is something only children experience, and once you turn 18, you grow out of it. I am relieved I no longer work for them. Story 60. 8th grade. You will never make it through college, was what I heard because of my learning disabilities. I made it through college without academic help. Take that. Story 61. New manager after the small company I worked for was acquired by a larger, less desirable company. I work 60 hours a week and only sleep 3 hours a night. Yes, being chronically sleep-deprived explains some of his questionable decisions, but being proud of it and expecting the same from workers with more physically demanding jobs was when I decided to leave that place. Story 62. I have many experiences, But the worst one I can remember right now was my boss when I was 17 years old. It was time for our company's health insurance review, and we all had to get our physicals done around the same time. My boss took this opportunity to find out how serious my eating disorder really was. She told me that if I had the lowest body mass index on the team, I would win $20. She claimed it would motivate the team to compete against someone with an eating disorder. I nearly harmed myself over it. I stopped eating, went on a water-only diet for 2 weeks, exercised daily, and managed to lower my body mass index enough to win her bet. I got $20, but at what cost? Story 63. Intern Manager. We are going to do this job you have been doing accurately for years in a completely different way. Fortunately, about 5 minutes later, the real manager comes in and tells him, "Do not interfere with these people. They know what they are doing." Story 64. You do not actually do anything here. My supervisor, as I was preparing to leave the company after years of managing and running an entire department without any support, acknowledged that I did more work than the majority of other employees combined. Story 65. I know your dad's funeral is coming up, but we need you to come in. I had to work until the day before. I understand this is difficult, but we need you in at 8 a.m. the next day. Story 66. While you are down there, I was a 14-year-old boy and he was a 50-year-old man, the boss at the bakery where I worked. Nothing ever happened to me, but he ended up taking his own life a decade later after being found with a substance abuse issue. Story 67. I received a vague response from my boss when I asked which task I should prioritize. I approached you because I'm unsure about what you want me to do first. Story 68. My 6th grade English teacher in South India pronounced leopard as Leo Leopard and made fun of me in front of the class for calling him out on it. Story 69. I had a boss trying to justify refusing the certification policy by saying, "At best, you are only semi-skilled labor." He was referring to licenses issued by the state that required 5 years of experience and 100 hours of classroom training just to be allowed to take the test. This license is required to run the surface water treatment plant. It is not unskilled labor. Story 70. You have taken too much emergency time off. After my grandfather died, my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer, and my son had open-heart surgery within a 2-month span. I apologize, but I need to ask my family not to have any more health issues. Story 71. To simplify my emails, I was communicating with individuals who had advanced degrees. Instead of asking me to clarify what they did not understand, they complained to my supervisor. Sometimes I wonder how these individuals tied their shoes without assistance, and yet they are in charge because they had time and resources 50 years ago. Story 72. A teacher once asked me what I was eating in class. It was nothing. What I was doing was nervously chewing the inside of my cheeks, which I didn't realize. She told me I needed a therapist if I didn't know what I was eating. She did not like the note she received from my father and tried to play it all off as a joke. This happened in 5th grade. More recently, I had been promoted to manager of a store where the previous manager had run it into the ground, failed corporate inspections, and stole. I was told that if I failed the upcoming inspection, I would be fired. Unlike the previous manager, I had no repeated chances, even though I had always been an exemplary employee with a flawless track record and experience. It was pretty off-putting. Of course, I passed with flying colors and pulled that store back into profit. Story 73. I asked for a promotion at my last job after being there 2.5 years and essentially doing every job release for the last year and a half, taking on the engineering manager's responsibilities after he left. The first response from my boss was, "Why do you want to be promoted?" I started looking for a new job that afternoon. They ended up giving me a checklist of things to complete within the next 3 months to be considered for promotion. I got promoted and found another job 2 months later. It offered an additional $21,000 a year, better benefits, and slightly less responsibility, so I was not the only one releasing work. It was an inappropriate comment to make to a young person in your company who wants to advance their career. Story 74. You need to relax and learn how to have more fun, said my therapist when I was experiencing extreme anxiety and struggling to function. It turns out I have complex post-traumatic stress disorder and required medication. Story 75. I was held back because a teacher was certain I cheated. I felt completely failed by the school system, and honestly, I think this man was just prejudiced. I received an A on the test. Mr. Chavez, you were a truly poor educator. My life went into a downward spiral after that. 15 years later, I am working on my general education development certificate, but if I saw that man today, I would feel compelled to confront him. Story 76. After completing my degree in finance, I joined a large bank and worked in their brokerage division. I enjoyed my work, continued to obtain advanced certifications, and received promotions to other areas of the bank. Over the years, I became very familiar with the bank systems, made key contacts, and was considered the go-to expert in many niche areas. I eventually decided to move to a quieter city after a 15-year career at the bank. At that point, I wanted to reduce my stress and workload. I landed an administrative role at the same company, working for a team of investment advisors. The team greatly benefited from my knowledge and contacts. This particular team was very successful, and I was busy trying to keep everything up to date with all their clients. One day, I accidentally forgot to encrypt an email that contained a client's account number. I immediately admitted my mistake. At the end of that day, the advisors brought me into a room and scolded me like a child, despite us all being relatively the same age. Shortly after that, I resigned. I believe they felt I was abandoning them. The lack of respect and awareness on their part was shocking. From what I've heard from former coworkers, they are very bitter about my leaving abruptly, even though I gave them 3 months to find a replacement. Story 77. Telling me to do something while I'm already doing it makes me immediately reluctant to comply. You need to clean up this mess. Asterisk me, holding the freshly soaked mop asterisk. Well, now I don't want to. Story 78. I know what they did to you is wrong, but the project is only a few weeks from launch. It's best if you don't put it in writing and let me handle it. A member of my team, for whom I was the manager, threw a large stack of papers at my face and head, then stormed out of the room when asked about what he had been working on during the week. A normal status update. My own manager did not address the situation, and I felt sidelined from my own project, which made me feel completely unsafe. It also affected my relationships with other team members. I am a strong person, so I felt like I should just carry on. In retrospect, I should have immediately documented the incident. It still infuriates me today, 15 years later. Story 79. Years ago, my boss was having trouble finding someone to fill a position in another department. I offered to fill in until they could find a replacement and inquired about a pay increase due to the added responsibilities. After some time, I was informed that it would be an additional $5,000, along with a remark that it was a lot for you. I used that position to improve my networking skills and get to know other managers. I am now earning 3 times more. Story 80. If you have time to lean, then you have time to clean. However, I have a brief window between when I finished my last task and when my next one needs to begin. I'm not going to scrub the floors in the middle of the lunchtime rush. Story 81. People avoid my immediate coworkers because they lack competence and come directly to me. After pointing this out to my supervisor multiple times and highlighting their most significant mistakes, I was told I need to be less of a perfectionist. So that's exactly what I did. Story 82. My boss told me I wasn't smart, which is why I was working there and nowhere else. I'm not sure what that says about him. Story 83. I'm the parent, as in I'm in charge. However, we are both adults. The most notable instance of this was when my mother felt undermined and insulted because I was trying to take control by reading street signs for her. They were in German, as we were in Germany. My mother does not speak German, but I do. She became so angry that she hit me, so I promptly stopped translating the street signs. She did not like this either. Story 84. In middle school, I was told that I needed to be more social and pleasant to others, as no one wanted to be friends with an ice queen. Now, I hear the same people asking why I go out of my way to please everyone, suggesting that no one likes a doormat. Story 85. My female boss asked me to confront another female coworker about her noticeable body odor. My boss felt too embarrassed to have the conversation. I ended up making that poor girl cry. Story 86. I was organizing an end-of-shift cleanup. I was the only one on the shop floor of my grade trying to manage 25 extremely tired people. A manager told me I was just walking around doing nothing. I looked at her, shook my head, handed her my broom, and walked off. Jackie, you were completely clueless. Story 87. I told my boss about a coworker harassing me, and his response was, "Are you going to report every guy that is interested in you?" Honestly, I was shocked. I had never reported anyone before, and this coworker was saying he would harm himself if I didn't date him. Story 88. You shouldn't be having these thoughts. It's video games that are causing this. My mother, after I turned 9 years old, told me she wasn't sure how much more bullying I could take. She is your teacher. It is her right to discipline you as she sees fit. My mother, when I was 6 years old, told me about a teacher who grabbed me and threatened to gouge my eyes out. Hey, son, how about we drive the car into the canal and end our lives? My dad made a joke when I was 12 years old and in a very bad place. Story 89. A boss I had once said that I was only accepted to college and received good grades because I am not white. I remember crying in my car in the parking lot at work for a long time before I finally felt strong enough to drive myself home. I worked hard to get to and through college, maintained a 4.0 GPA until my junior year, was inducted into Phi Beta Kappa, won multiple academic merit scholarships, and even received an international research award. But yes, it was all due to reverse racism or whatever. Story 90. Me. Why didn't I get an automatic raise when everyone else did? Shaboss. Oops, it seems a mistake was made. Me. So how much will I receive? Shaboss. Sorry, our budget is fully allocated now. You cannot have a raise until next year's budget. Story 91. I was having an issue with high blood sugar, which can lead to frequent urination. When I explained the situation to my 9th grade humanities teacher after having to leave class to use the bathroom for the 4th time, they said, "I know diabetic people and that doesn't happen." Story 92. I am a calculus teacher at a college. On the second day of class, after a difficult first day, a classmate asked for clarification on the syllabus. The teacher became very angry, slammed his books and notes together, and told the class he would return when we were ready to learn before storming out of the room. On the third day of class, I returned with a drop/add form for him to sign. Story 93. I have 3 of the 7 types of dyslexia, and when I was a child, I remember being in a parent-teacher meeting with my mother. The teacher said, "I'll be happy if he's just able to copy what I write on the board." My mother responded, "What about his understanding of what's written on the board?" The teacher dodged the question and changed the subject. Looking back at it years later, I have strong feelings about that experience. Story 94. When working in a factory, I found a way to improve the product's appearance upon completion without incurring additional time, production, or financial costs. My supervisor told me that is not how we operate here. Employees follow directions and do not deviate or experiment. Story 95. I was about 19 or 20 when I found myself in an informal meeting with our regional director, who was one step above my line manager. He had a fairly intimidating appearance, probably in his late 30s or early 40s. He asked for my opinion on something and I shared it. He politely suggested I consider it from a different perspective and offered a good alternative. I responded, "Okay, yes, I think you're right." He replied, "Yes, I am right. That's why I'm a director." Story 96. Find a boyfriend while you are in university. After you graduate, men may be intimidated by your success, and you could end up single. This is advice from an uncle who considered himself progressive. He meant well, but his approach was misguided. Needless to say, I did not take his advice. Story 97. A teacher corrected a creative writing piece where a character, in dialogue, said something like, "Wow, I'm exhausted." She crossed out the informal term and replaced it with exhausted. Story 98. 1 cubic meter of water weighs 100 kilograms. I believe I have been fortunate. It was easily disproven, yet she remained adamant about it. Story 99. I was arguing with my boss the other day. I work in project management. He said, "No one cares about the work plan. You're the only one who ever asks for it." I realized then that he is not worth arguing with anymore. Story 100. A client once told me that he found my personality a little rough, meaning not polished. I think my efforts to appear polished highlighted the fact that I wasn't. I don't come from wealth, and in my profession, I interact with some exclusive circles. In response, I stopped trying so hard. I still look clean and presentable, but I no longer attempt to match the tone and style of affluent individuals. I've actually done much better since adopting this approach. Story 101. Despite your decade-long success in demonstrating the benefits of our full-time remote work policy, we are replacing it with a 3-day-per-week in-office policy. We understand this decision may cause frustration, disruptions, and lower morale, but we believe it is essential for improving collaboration and company culture. Story 102. I worked as an assistant art teacher at a private academy for children with special needs. One day, my supervisor yelled at me for an hour because I missed a few minutes of work to go to the emergency room. She launched into a lengthy speech about how my generation is weak, claimed I would never succeed as an artist if I didn't work hard, and bragged that she didn't miss work when she miscarried her second child or was hit by a car and shattered her pelvis. Bragging about pushing through physical neglect and major injury didn't sit well with me. I wasn't willing to meet that kind of expectation, especially while being criticized for only $12 an hour. I quit immediately with no notice. Thanks to the emergency room referral to neurology, I was diagnosed with a progressive movement disorder and severe nerve dysfunction shortly after. Now, I'm a reasonably well-known, fully disabled artist who can support myself with my income. Her art business went under 8 months after I left. Story 103. I overheard my boss say, "We only hired her because we needed the position filled. I didn't want to hire another woman." It was 3 days in. Story 104. You should be grateful I even gave you a chance. Wow, thanks for the bare minimum wrapped in condescension. Story 105. Probably when someone said, "That's just how it is," after I pointed out something unfair. Thanks for the lack of explanation. Story 106. At age 14, after parents' evening, my dad told me, "You're a failure and you're going nowhere in life." After I received a D grade in science, the teachers gave us a full chemistry test without having taught us any of the syllabus yet, as we had just finished the biology syllabus for the term. They thought the chemistry grade would best represent our current attainment for some reason, so that grade was included on everyone's reports. My teacher even informed him that I was just 2 marks away from a passing grade and that I received the second highest grade in my year group, but my dad kept repeating, "But it's a D grade." That was the only teacher we spoke to that evening, as he insisted we leave right after. In the car, my dad reiterated his comments and called my mom, saying, "I'm bringing your son home. I will never forget that day. I was just trying not to cry while he drove me home." Story 107. Things often get worse as they go along, and if I face difficulties, I will bring you all with me. We all took that as a challenge, more or less. Story 108. The customer is always right in a situation where there is plenty of evidence showing just how wrong the customer can be, and we are also not making any profit from them. Story 109. Don't bring me problems. Bring me solutions. Unfortunately, he couldn't understand the concept of coaching and uplifting his team. Story 110. My boss at Walmart told me we would no longer receive bonuses, and then he turned around a week later bragging about his quarterly bonus and how impressively large it was. That was the motivation I needed to find a better job. Story 111. My boss needed me to go online and retrieve data from a specific website. This was going to take many hours due to the way the data was stored, but I could break it up into smaller time blocks. This was back when many people were using dial-up internet. I wasn't allowed to go online at work because I couldn't tie up the phone line, although no one ever called but him. I also wasn't allowed to work from home, where I had faster internet access, because employees who worked from home were considered unreliable and did not work as much as they claimed. Since I had no way to get the online data he wanted, I focused on ensuring that the data we did have was accurately entered. Several months later, chaos ensued, and he lost his temper when he realized that I didn't have all the data he wanted, calling me incompetent and unreliable. Thankfully, for other reasons, I and the other employees lost our jobs not long after this incident. My current boss is amazing, and I can see just how toxic my former workplace was. Story 112. I tried to contest a speeding ticket by arguing that installing larger wheels made my speedometer read lower. I believe this is true, although it may be irrelevant to my case, because the larger circumference requires more time to complete a revolution. As a result, a mechanical speedometer will register a slower speed than it was calibrated for. The judge interrupted me to state that the opposite was true, so I had, in fact, been speeding significantly. Story 113. My older sister, when I asked a question as a child, told me, "Why do people always wonder why things are as they are? Can't they just accept that it is what it is?" Those were not wise words. I was more frustrated by the mindset I was surrounded by while growing up, as it hindered my own attitude toward learning and pushing myself. Story 114. A math teacher once leaned over my desk during a test and whispered that I was wasting everyone's time and that I should just give up and drop out of school. I really hope she received help for whatever was troubling her. I also had a professor review my resume as part of a business class. She told me that my sentence about veterinary medicine was incorrect because medicine was something you took, not something you did. Story 115. It's beneficial when individuals lose access to the service we provide, as it allows others in line to receive service more quickly. Story 116. When I called my bosses horrible people while they underpaid and overworked me, my mom said they were good people who did good things for the community. Story 117. I had a boss tell me they think I don't take my career seriously because I don't work through lunch or extra hours. At my first review, I had the second lowest average hours, still above 40 as a salaried employee, and the second highest productivity rating. And you know what? He said, "We'd like to see you increase your hours a bit." And I thought, no. Why would I work more hours when I'm already more productive? Efficiency with my time is a more useful metric. You work for your boss, but you live for yourself. When you lose your job, you still have your life. Work-life balance is real. Do not sacrifice your life to make your boss rich. He will not make you rich. Story 118. Can you show me how to do that process where it is something anyone should know how to do? Asked by the manager who had only been working for the company for 5 months and was promoted ahead of me, despite my being there for almost 2 years at this point. Story 119. My parents lied to me my entire life about where I came from because they were afraid I would say, "You're not my real dad." Story 120. Back in my retail days, I started talking to a customer who wanted a tablet. We had the tablet of the day on display at the end cap, so I walked her over to it and explained the features. Our positioning matters. I was standing beside the tablet, pointing out features and accessories, like a game show presenter to the woman standing across from me. She ended up buying everything: the tablet, the accessories, the protection package, and even signed up for the store credit card. This was a complete sale. I couldn't possibly have attached anything else to it. The manager approached me and started lecturing me. "You know, Steve, when you're making a sale at an end cap, you should stand beside the customer rather than beside the product. You'll get better results. Did you know that?" Story 121. Don't make something up. Just say you don't know. People can tell when you are making it up. This is good advice. However, the reason I received it from this person was due to getting into a situation by listening to them in the first place. They were the advisor for a student club in college that was part of an international competition. I was brought in to assist with fundraising, budgeting for the competition, building our project, and creating a presentation for industry experts and judges to serve as an investment pitch. I started to work on the presentation and focused on the finances, as I viewed that as the most important aspect. The advisor suggested I should sell it instead. Since he had executed this project back when he was in college and had been the advisor for this club for a few years, I took his advice. It turns out that selling it and not providing numbers about cost per unit, break-even point, profit per unit, market research, return on investment projections, etc., was not what they were looking for. I had done a lot of that work, but it wasn't included in the presentation, and I couldn't recall exactly what it was, so I tried to estimate on the fly. After the presentation, which we scored poorly on, I received that advice mentioned earlier. I was frustrated that it was good advice being delivered by that person, frustrated that their previous advice got me into this situation, frustrated that I took that initial advice and didn't listen to my instincts, and frustrated that because I listened, my portion of the project dropped our overall ranking significantly. That was over 10 years ago, and it is still fresh in my mind. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.